We have a really special program tonight. This is our last program of the year, actually, since December falls the week between Christmas and New Year's. And so this is our very last program of 2023, and it definitely will be a very special one. I'm sure you'll all think that. Just to give you a little bit of information about what's happening at the library, for those of you that are in the Red Bank area and have been able to come into the library, we've been doing a lot of renovation, which will continue into 2024. We still have been having ongoing programs in both the children's room and the adult room, and some of them are remote, like tonight's program, and some are in person. We have for adult programming Mahjong, which is a very big hit, which takes place on Tuesdays at 1 o'clock. We have guided journaling, which is remote. We have Bridge, which takes place over at the Senior Center while we're renovating. The best thing I could say, because it will take all of our program to tell you about everything that we have going on at the library, please go onto our website. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out. It would be great to sign up for that and get your information individually. But otherwise, if you look on our website, you can always go on to the calendar and join us for a program. Many of them do not require registration. But we are going to ask that everybody mute themselves when we do our presentation tonight. It's always best to not pick up background information, noise. So if you could mute yourself, that would be great. I'm not going to take a lot more time to be talking about what's going on at the library, because as I said, you look at our website, you come in and you'll find out that the Red Bank Public Library is a very active one. Our children's programs are renowned throughout the entire area as a result of Miss Sierra, and she has on average of 65 people come to her story times. We also have a story walk that's in Riverside Gardens, and I encourage you, even though it's a bit nippy, go over there and take a look because it's just terrific. So with our race programs, which are now in our 9th year, we have run the gamut of different conversations regarding racism in advertising, racism in different towns throughout the area, the history of racism. We have focused on LGBTQ programming. We've talked about women as a minority in our country. We've talked about biracial families, white privilege, and much, much more. But the one thing that we've really never talked about, which is very interesting, since beauty is one of the things that is so important in every country in the world, is beauty as an international obsession, and how it can be very racist, how harmful trying to have a racist beauty routine can be, with many countries, certainly in the US, having standards that are incredibly toxic to many people who are using products that are really terrible for them. And as much as we want to say that, oh, we're not racist in many ways, there's still young boys being suspended from school for having afros. There's still a lot of women that are using, lighteners for their skin, so they'll look more European. But we will get into all of that tonight in our program. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Patty White, who's going to talk to you about a little Zoom etiquette, and enjoy the program. One other thing, tonight we want to engage everyone and have an interactive audience. So while our presenter will be presenting, please put things in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll try to get some questions in as the program is going. Okay, thank you very much for being with us. This program could never happen without all of you. Patty?
Thank you, Linda, and welcome everyone. Just another reminder, as Linda mentioned, we definitely want audience participation, and that is one of the things people like most about this program. But when you're not speaking, please keep your device muted. If we hear background noise, we might mute you. And it's also to prevent any feedback from the program itself. Questions and comments can be put into the chat. And if you want to raise your hand, just remember we may not see you visually on the screen. At the bottom of your screen, under reactions, you should be able to find an icon that says raise hand. And that way, we'll know that you want to make a comment or a question, or else, of course, you can put it in the chat. Claire Phelps will be introducing our speaker, and it's so nice to welcome you all.
Great. Thank you so much, Patty. Good evening, everyone, and welcome again to our program tonight. Our speaker and guest tonight is Kayla Williams. She is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Environmental Justice Lead with Clean Production Action. She joined Clean Production Action as Communications and Program Coordinator in the summer of 2019. She's a graduate of Tufts University, in which she earned a BA in Environmental Studies with a concentration in Sustainability, Policy, and Equity, and a BA in Anthropology. Clean Production Action designs and delivers strategic solutions for green chemicals, sustainable materials, and environmentally preferable products. She plays an essential role in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and pushing for strategic and meaningful implementation of these and environmental justice values by the organization. She brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to guide the organization forward. Aside from her lived experience, Kayla's educational background in anthropology has equipped her with a strong understanding of structures and practices of race and racism. She's committed to working toward a cleaner, greener, and safer environment for people of all walks of life and looks forward to building her career in environmental justice and advocacy. Welcome, Kayla. And we'll turn the program over to her right now. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. It's so amazing to see so many of my friends and family here. So I'm going to start my presentation. This is the November call for Red Bank Public Libraries. Let's talk about race. And today's topic is white beauty standards and the kind of products marketed towards women of color specifically to help us achieve that look. So I won't talk about myself really that much anymore. Claire, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and a lot of you know me. But I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Lead at Clean Production Action. Clean Production Action is a nonprofit organization. I do want to specify that CPA isn't an environmental justice or advocacy organization, but we feel that the tools and programs that we create are valuable to environmental justice leaders and community advocacy organizations that are doing their own corporate engagements and trying to lobby against companies using toxic chemicals in their products, because it is an environmental justice issue. And at Clean Production Action, we understand that a marketplace that's dependent on toxic chemicals is also dependent on racism and injustice. As long as there are toxic chemicals in circulation, they will always be placed on the people deemed least valuable by society, people made vulnerable by systemic racism and injustice. So not just Black and brown people, but women and children, disabled people, all are at risk when it comes to the toxic chemicals in our marketplace. So this is the agenda, kind of the flow of today's program. I know this group, hopefully you've joined many of these calls and have a deep understanding of systemic racism and a white advantage. But I am going to spend some time talking about those topics as foundational concepts for the discussion and reflection we'll have when I introduce chemical footprints and the toxic chemicals and products marketed towards women of color. So I have built in some prompts for reflection and discussion throughout the presentation. As the host mentioned, if you have a question during the presentation, feel free to put it in the chat. I might not see it, so if the moderator or someone else could flag for me, that would be great. And then I also thought that it would be nice to just mention that some of these topics may be uncomfortable. They might feel weird to you. You might not really like thinking about them. But I want to encourage everyone here participating to, when you feel that uncomfy feeling, if things are feeling difficult, try to turn to wonder instead of pushing it away or defensiveness, but really just thinking about why you're having the reaction that you're having, rather than reacting to the discomfort, just really sitting in it and trying to understand it. And also for the reflections and for the prompts, you don't have to participate. It's completely voluntary if you'd like to speak up and share with the group, because some of the questions, I guess, could be a little personal. But I do want to remind all of you that your participation in the discussion is a gift. It's a gift to the rest of us who are here, who can learn from you and your story and your lived experience. So be open to it and not afraid of it. All right, so just diving right in here, starting with systemic racism. So firstly, race is social. It's not biological, meaning a scientist could extract your entire human genome from your DNA inside your cells and look at everything that makes you, you, and they will not find anything, if they were looking at me, to be able to say, well, oh, Kayla's a Black person. And they can't do that for Linda and say, yeah, Linda's a white person. It just doesn't exist. And biologically, there's more variation among humans in the same race as there are across races. Race is totally a spectrum, and it's been constructed socially. It's very real socially and politically. I'm not saying it doesn't exist or that there aren't lived consequences for being assigned a race or identifying as a race. Just saying that in science, it's not a thing. It's only a thing because human beings made it a thing. So the first instance we see in historical texts about a explicitly defined quote unquote white race was actually during the colonial period. And this, I'm talking about this in a United States context, but we first see the explicit calling of a white race in the 1680s in Virginia. And this was put in place to distinguish which citizens of this colony would be able to access certain rights and privileges, like being able to own property or learning how to read, for example. And this was happening in the United States colonies, or what would become the United States. But it is important to remember that colonization was really popping off for a lot of European empires during this time. So what was the point in doing that? Why did they do that? Well, a group of self-designated white people, white men, gave themselves power to construct and define a white race. And this has continued throughout the United States history. And it's what enabled a lot of the injustice and violence that the United States was founded on, like the enslavement of so many African people and other stolen people, genocide against Indigenous Native Americans, Chinese Exclusion Act, Japanese internment camps. The list really goes on and on. So the construction of race has continued throughout United States history, and it's been central to our country's economic development and the development of wealth and power as we have exploited those peoples who are not white. So people who are not white have been exploited in order to advance, like I said, the economy, agriculture, our railroads, our manufacturing, the industrialization of the United States. So essentially, the story of race is very connected to the story of labor. Racism has been used as a tactic to ensure that there's a working class of people. This is possible because when you teach racism and instill ideologies that are founded in white supremacy, you create racial solidarity among white people, so that even the poorest of poor white people that aren't doing much better than your average Black or brown person truly believe that they are entitled to the privileges and advantages of the very small handful of white people who have a mass accumulation of wealth and power. When you break class solidarity among working people, you ensure that there's always a working class of people. A quick thought exercise: think about how the last few presidential elections might have been if all working class people voted the same way. Just food for thought. So that's a background on systemic racism. And so it's really was there since before the founding of this country, and inherently has been built into every step of the way in terms of building the American empire of what it is today. And it wouldn't be possible without it. So with that being said, it's nice to be white. It's really cool if you are, because the history of practices and policies that have benefited white people and disadvantaged people of color has enormous impact in terms of your ability to accumulate wealth and also account for wealth disparities that we see today. And also these wealth disparities in turn contribute to other disparities like health inequity and environmental injustice. These are some things we're going to talk about later on. Yeah. So I wanted to take a moment here and pose this question to the group. I know it's a big question, but I'd like you all to just think about if there was ever a time in your life when your perceived or self-identified racial or gender identity provided you an advantage. So whether that means your perceived identity could mean like, oh, this person saw me and they thought I was a man because I had my hood up and sunglasses on and whatever. So maybe that's not how you identify, but it's how someone else perceived you and identified you. Or self-identified, meaning I identify this way, I'm a Black woman. And then to think even further, to go deeper, what are the short and long-term implications of that advantage? So, as I said before, it's not mandatory that you speak up and answer this question in front of the entire group. But I do want to take just a few minutes to let people think more deeply about this question, and then invite anyone to share if they feel called to. I can actually share an example that happened to me very recently, with some people really close to me, and it left me feeling really bad, but I think it's a good example. So you can see my personal, like how I present outwardly. I'm pretty fair skinned. Like for a Black person, I'm pretty pale. And so I was with, if you know my sisters, Julia and Maya, we're all different colors, we're all different shades. Julia's also pretty light skinned. Maya has darker skin. Maya is a warm chocolate person. And we were trying on different makeup shades with this makeup lady for a certain makeup brand. And she's putting different swatches on us. She's putting them on herself. And she goes, well, I get really tan in the summer, but I don't get that dark. And she goes like this, like towards my sister. And at that moment, it felt very uncomfortable because I was experiencing an advantage because of my perceived identity as a lighter skinned Black person. I wasn't the person that microaggression was directed towards. And so it didn't hurt me the way that it hurt my sister. So the advantage was that I wasn't exposed to that negative experience that wasn't directed towards me. I didn't have to sit with that later on. I didn't have to tell my sisters how bad that made me feel that we didn't speak up and stand up for me. And yeah, that was one example, a recent example, where just my color, my shade was able to shield me from racial trauma, like in real time, in real life. And I think the short and long-term implications of that and other advantages that I experience as a fair-skinned Black person, fair-skinned person of color, is that even though I'm not a white person, I have closer proximity to whiteness than my darker counterparts. And so that means that I'll probably end up in situations like that again, where I'm around other colors of people with different lived experience that have hate directed towards them when I'm standing next to them, just because I have whiter skin. And so for me, my biggest takeaway from that whole experience was to first just like believe my sister and what she said when she said that was messed up, that you just stood there and didn't call out that lady and didn't try to defend me or protect me. So I think a lot of people, when you get checked like that, when you proclaim yourself an ally, like somebody that is going to stand up and do the right thing, and somebody says, well, you didn't and you're not doing that, the initial reaction is always defensiveness. It's always a kind of like a selfish reaction of like, well, that's not what I meant, and I'm not a bad person. And why would you say that to me? And that wasn't like what I wanted to happen. I wish it happened differently, but it's not my fault that it didn't. Um, so yeah, the many implications of that have been learning that I need to hear that, and that I'll probably need to hear it again multiple times. And that if a situation does arise like that again, I need to speak up and I need to be forward because of the advantage that I have that someone else might not. And so I believe it's helping me become a better person and definitely better at my job, since a lot of it is presenting and facilitating conversations around topics related to race and racism. But it can be a lot to sit with and wrap your head around and be able to move forward from. I think it's another good example of how turning to wonder and curiosity instead of sinking into the guilt that I felt afterward is helpful for repairing the harm that was caused in the past, not changing it, but trying to get to a better place moving forward and making a real commitment to do things differently in the future.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Kayla. Someone had a comment. Kathy said, "You are brave to own that and support your sister after the fact." So,
yeah, I honestly feel like it's the least I can do, right? It's the bare minimum. She was brave for telling me how she felt after she was let down so hard by her older sister. That was braver. That was harder. And again, yeah. that comment wasn't directed towards me. That was directed towards her. And so a lot of her personal strength went towards dealing with the immediate effects of that hurtful comment and my silence. So thank you for your nice comment. But yeah, I don't know if I would call it brave. I would call it more just like my duty.
Well, I had a situation many years ago, a little bit similar to that, when I was with one of my cousins. And in my family, like many families, we're all kind of different shades. So, something came up about that as well. So it happens. It happens. And it's just an ongoing thing that we work with every day.
Yeah. And not to justify what happened, Kayla, but a lot of times I think when comments like that are made, you're just like so astonished that the person is saying this. You don't know how to react at the time. It's afterwards that you think, geez, I should have said this. Or we don't often have the right comment at the time when things are said. I mean, it's all a growth experience.
Yeah. Well, just speaking for myself, like I did want to say something. And in my head, I said, okay, if she says something else, I'm going to call her out.
Yeah.
But she didn't. It was one and done.
Yeah.
And I think that was a moment of me just feeling like, okay, so I got this advantage. Like, I didn't have to just deal with that. And it just didn't hit me the same. I'm sure if it did, I would have spoken up there and then. But I did make a choice in that moment to not say something. I knew what I would have said, but I chose not to say it. So yeah, that was just my own personal experience, and it is very personal how anyone would react to something like that happening. But I also think that it gets easier over time when you do start to call it out and acknowledge harm as it's being caused. It's very difficult to do. I think it's really difficult for women to do, especially. There's a hand raised.
Yeah, Roland Shaw. Roland, do you want to say something?
Yes, good evening. Hi,
Hi.
Kayla. Nice to meet everyone. And I'm listening to what it is you're saying. And just from my experiences, I'm a Black woman, and I come across instances. I'm not necessarily a darker complexion Black woman. I'm somewhere in the middle, I suppose. But I've learned that sometimes the best response is no response, because had you said something and this person with this level of ignorance, because I think she was merely just speaking out of ignorance, it could have escalated to a place where I'm sure you don't want to go. And I've learned that sometimes just society, people at large, regardless of their racial background, sometimes people just say things out of just ignorance. For example, I was in line at Home Goods. I love Home Goods, and one of the cashiers, we were in line, and one of the cashiers just yelled out, "Next." And I was like, ooh, it was kind of it kind of echoed. It's like, wow. I said, usually it's like, can I help you? I was chatting with the ladies in line, and one of the ladies, and I said to her, I said, I would never say that. And her response was, I bet you'd say something like, hey, yo. So you can imagine my face. And it bothered me all the way home. It bothered me for weeks. It bothered me for months. But I just still say no response was the best response.
Yeah, I think for people of color, for Black women, you would need to pick your battles for sure. And that's also a personal choice. And it's hard to run through whatever checklist you have in your mind. But I agree, sometimes it's not worth it. Sometimes it's not worth it. So I think if you have the energy, you're not fearful for your safety, your physical safety, because you've already been put in an unsafe place mentally and emotionally, but your physical safety, then I think then it's okay to speak up. But if you don't feel like it's worth it for you, if you feel like it's going to take more out of you trying to advocate for yourself and also educate someone against their ignorance or personal bias, then it's not always worth it. But that instance I was talking about for me, again, because the comment wasn't directed towards me. I, you know, I clocked it. I had the energy to address it. The lady wasn't going to do anything to me. And I actually did follow up with her later on and tell her that was not okay. And she needs to do better for Black clients she has in the future. And she was receptive.
Oh, good.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I do agree. It's something you have to think about and decide in the
Yeah, I think,
moment. If
right. I think in your case, perhaps bringing it to the attention of the management. And then, of course, there's always leaving a review about your experience.
Yeah,
That's a good tool that I often utilize. But bring it to the attention of the manager. Unfortunately, I was talking with a customer, so there's no one for me to have gone to. But had that been an
yeah,
employee, absolutely bring that to the manager's attention. And let them deal with that situation appropriately.
Yeah, that's another
But
good
I'm sorry your
suggestion.
sister and yourself had that experience, and let it go, because that person, that comment she made, she's not thinking about it. I promise you, she's not thinking about that anymore. She's going on with her life, insulting others. That's just what she does. It sounds like, to be so bold to say that, so in the moment. It sounds like it was just a quick comment. So that's just who she is. And I've learned the hard way that when someone shows me who they are, I will believe them, and I will never stoop to any level of ignorance or to get down and dirty, as they say. It's just, I've decided to live my life at a higher standard. If that's what works for them, who am I to educate them? For me, it may sound a little bit, I hope not distorted, but let them go about their lives being ignorant, if that's how, but their choices, that's their choice. But my choice is to live at a higher standard and to treat everyone fair. My family background, I have everyone in my family. So I don't have these personal hangups and issues. I treat everyone fairly. And I try to, my mantra is to just to be a light, to be an example, because there has been times where I would acknowledge someone and that's not, of my color, different race, and they would, like, surprise, like, oh, it's like, of course, if I see an interracial couple, I embrace that. I come from, an interracial, mom and dad. So I I look at the world, people are people. There's good and there's bad in every race. Unfortunately, it seems like the bad ones are the loudest, but there's a lot of good people out there. So I think that we should just let our light shine, let the ignorant ones remain in their ignorance, and let's just be a light. That's just how I live.
Mm. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Roylyn.
Very nice.
Well, I'm going to continue on because there's still a lot to cover. So the next thing I wanted to introduce was white beauty standards. So within the historical context I mentioned before, a history of policies and practices created to intentionally benefit white people and create a disadvantage for people who are not white. The result can be an internalized racial superiority among white people that can be manifested into believing that white beauty standards and norms are universal. So, if white people have historically had so much power and influence over defining who is worthy of certain rights and privileges, then what does that mean for those of us who aren't white? Well, human beings by nature, we want to conform, we want to fit into our social group. We want to feel good with the other people around us. We want to be treated well by them. So we want to conform. And because of a history of discrimination against skin tones, races, and hair types, Linda mentioned recent legislation like the Crown Act being passed that makes it illegal to discriminate against Black hair textures and hairstyles, because that is a real thing that could happen. There's Black people alive who have been kicked out of school, lost a job, lost opportunities just because of their hair texture, their hairstyle. Same thing for non-white people in general. So a lot of the time for people of color, it means internalizing a self-hatred and instilling an aspiration not to become white, but to become more white, more like a white person. So this image is from a Fair and Lovely advertisement. Fair and Lovely is a skin lightening cream that is sold all over the world. You can buy it in the United States. So skin bleaching, hair straightening, these are methods non-white people, non-white women, women of color especially, can use to attain certain looks that get them a little bit closer to whiteness. Because even just a little bit closer is going to afford you certain advantages you didn't have before. So if you are a woman of color, maybe you've gotten comments like, oh, you're so pretty for a Black person. Or you shouldn't go out in the sun too much. Like, you need to stay indoors this summer. You're getting too dark, or you have too many freckles now. Or if your hair is kind of like mine, kinky, curly. Have you ever straightened your hair before? I wonder what it would look like straight. Or your hair is straightened at that moment and somebody says, oh, I really like your hair that way. It looks so much better. These comments become internalized and they teach you that you should change your appearance. You do look better. You are more socially valuable if you're fair and lovely versus dark and whatever the opposite of lovely is. Ugly, I guess. So white beauty standards are rooted in systemic racism, and they create a lot of societal pressure for women of color and even white women who don't adhere to white beauty standards to change themselves to fit into certain molds because they're deemed more valuable by a society that prioritizes whiteness. So next, I'm going to introduce this topic of chemical footprints. So, let me check the chat really quick.
Julia has.
Julia has a comment.
Yeah.
Even when it's expected for me to always have my hair slicked down and always styled, even as an afro, it's never allowed to look messy at all. What would I give to not be judged to have a messy bun?
Right. So, I don't know, if you were on the internet, like on social media in the late, early aughts, it was definitely a trend, like messy bun trend for women and girls. But women and girls with straight hair, you know, you put it up in a bun, it's not slicked back, there's some loose pieces, but it looks cute and it's a messy bun. And it looks like you rolled out of bed, but you actually were intentional in the messiness. Well, I think Julia's saying a messy bun doesn't exist if you have afro hair. It's just messy. It's not a cute look. It's not a trend. It's just a mess. Yeah. Good comment, Julia. Or
Forget Amanda Sora has something too, Kayla.
Sammy Sosa completely changed his appearance with skin bleaching. Even rich Black men are susceptible.
Yeah, it's not just women.
Right. So, yeah, you can look up pictures from Sammy Sosa. He is like, it's more drastic than this line in this lady's face. But again, it's the same for men as it is for women. The closer you can get to whiteness, the more social advantage you will experience. That's the motivation. And because it's internalized, a lot of that messaging comes from within our own communities. Like, it's other Black people telling you that you can't come in my house if your hair isn't pressed. Or, no, you can't do picture day today because I don't like how your hair looks. Yeah, sounds like at least some of our attendees are able to identify examples, real world examples of this in their own life, or public figures, or maybe those around them. Okay, so chemical footprints. So one program of my organization, Clean Production Action, is the Chemical Footprint Project. The Chemical Footprint Project defines a chemical footprint as the total mass of chemicals of high concern used by a singular user. That could be an event, an organization, a building, a service, or it could be one person, you as a person. A chemical of high concern is a carcinogen, mutagen, or developmental/reproductive toxicant. So that means a chemical that is cancer causing, is causing mutation to your cells, so causing irregular activity on a molecular level in your body. Developmental or reproductive toxicant, this means it's affecting your reproductive system, your ability to have children, whether you're a man or a woman, or if you're a pregnant person, the development of your baby. Chemicals of high concern are persistent, bioaccumulative, and they're toxic. Persistent means it doesn't break down over time. Once it's in the atmosphere, or it's in the water, or it's in the ground, it persists. It's not biodegrading. It's not breaking down into something non-toxic. It's remaining intact and it's remaining toxic. Bioaccumulative means it's building up over time. Since it's not breaking down, it's not going anywhere. It's just piling up. So chemicals of high concern, they cause serious effects to human health. They can cause serious effects to the environment that give level to serious concern, like endocrine disruption or neurotoxicity. So, like, damaging your brain or your hormonal systems in your body. So Clean Production Action defines a chemical of concern as a chemical that meets this criteria. If you're interested in like the toxicology and the science behind that, you can go on our website and learn about our hazard assessment methodology and the specific molecular criteria that's used to define our chemicals of high concern. Patty, I'm going to get to your comment towards a little bit later. But in Patty's comment, formaldehyde is an example of a chemical of high concern that is carcinogenic, highly carcinogenic, and linked to increased instances in uterine cancer. But I'm going to get to that later on. Any questions or comments about chemical footprints or chemicals of high concern. Okay.
There were two other comments, I think, that pertain to the previous topic, Kayla. One from Titania Hawkins, colorism, and then from Maya, texturism, regarding, I guess, skin color and hair.
Yeah.
And then Sue Goldberg, her comment indicated she didn't want to share this with the group, but her reaction to the last participant was a bit different from what she said. She says, I do understand it shouldn't be the responsibility of people of color to educate those of us who are not. But then there's the fact that many of us want to know if we've committed a microaggression in such a way that we can do better. We don't want to continue to be ignorant. We want to improve. Not sure what the best avenue would be. And so
I think the best, just to respond to that, I think the best avenue is to seek out someone like me that has a job title related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or justice or bias. Find somebody who gets paid to educate people on how to be better when it comes to these things. Definitely don't assume that a person of color has the time, the energy, or mental capacity to teach you unless they verbally told you that they want to do that and it's okay for you to ask them questions and they're happy to do it. But definitely don't make the assumption. I understand wanting to become better and get the educational experience you can by being called out in such moment, but like Royland mentioned, it's not always possible for the person that is having harm caused towards them. So definitely don't expect that. I would say seek out somebody who has told you that they want to do that with you, they're happy to do that with you, or find somebody that's getting paid to do that for other people.
Royal Lynn has her hand up again.
Kayla, I was just thinking for the person that was wanting to, be educated or better informed about how to respond or what have you, why not just exercise the golden rule? Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And if we would take the emphasis off of the person's complexion and look at the individual as an individual, a human being, perhaps we wouldn't be so apt to make those comments. For example, the woman that made the comment to Kayla's sister, had it been a white person standing there, would she have said, oh, well, you're too pale, or whatever the case may have been? It's like it probably wouldn't have come out, but her emphasis was on Kayla's sister's complexion, so she was able to demonstrate her level of ignorance. So for me, I look at people as people unless you give me a reason to do otherwise. But in my walk, I've just learned that, and even you look at the news, oftentimes correction is not well received. It can be interpreted as we're being aggressive, or we're hostile. There's those stereotypes and labels out there as well. So you can't lean on us necessarily to give you that insight. My advice would be, like I said initially, just exercise the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, and look at society, look at people as people and not so much on their complexion. Because if someone was your same complexion or my same complexion, there's certain things perhaps I would or would not say, and vice versa. So let's just be mindful at the end of the day, we're all the human race. I come from the finance industry. I've done public speaking events, and yes, you do have those that are there, but at large, sometimes we just can't wear our feelings on our sleeves, and we're really not as ignorant as we'd like to believe we are. we kind of know if we're overstepping a boundary. So let's just be mindful. That's all. Just the golden rule. Simple.
Wow. Okay, we have a couple of other comments here. And
you want to just hold off for a couple minutes, Claire, just so we're at 8 o'clock now. I just want Kayla to be able to present what she's got for a little while.
Exactly. Okay, very good. We'll move on then.
I appreciate Royland's comments, but I do warn against complete color blindness. It is important to recognize the discrimination people encounter because of racism, colorism, texturism. That's very real. And like working against it does require seeing it. But again, my advice to any white person or any person that wants to talk more, learn more, wants more history, wants more workshops, education, find somebody who is connected in that professional space who can help you identify those resources. Tatiana put something in the chat about seminars offered through Monmouth University. So seek out those educational opportunities that exist, for you as an audience. And again, just take ownership of your personal education and awareness and building that up however you can. So the next thing I wanted to draw everyone's attention to is the disproportionate level of toxic chemicals in products, beauty products that are marketed towards Black women and people of color. So I know that we have a Food and Drug Administration, but the reality is federal regulations that exist, that are meant to exist to protect consumers from chemicals of high concern in the products that they use, are not effective. They're not keeping those chemicals out of products. They are very prominent in every marketplace. And it really doesn't matter if you're shopping at Whole Foods or Target or the dollar store. There are toxic chemicals everywhere. So many personal care and household products contain endocrine disrupting chemicals that interfere with hormones in the body and can affect reproductive and nervous systems, metabolism. They can lead to cancer. Research also showed that endocrine disruptors are likely to contribute to health problems that exacerbate the effects of COVID-19. In the United States, Black women have higher rates of diabetes. They experience early menarche, or their periods start earlier. They have more prevalent fibroids and more aggressive forms of breast cancer and endometrial cancers. That's from Silent Spring Institute. Black women face disproportionate risks from largely unregulated toxic chemicals in beauty and personal care products. This was an article from Inside Climate News that came out just a couple days ago. Black women are disproportionately exposed to toxic chemicals in the workplace, communities, and from cosmetics. This was from a resource from Women's Voices for the Earth. Very, very recently, the FDA proposed a ban on formaldehyde in hair straighteners. And these new regulations in the cosmetics industry should take effect in December. But it's really, again, like the bare minimum when it comes to protecting human health and the environment and getting toxic chemicals out of consumer products. And then the last point I just have here is that societal pressure to conform is a factor in why Black women are twice as likely than other groups to use hair relaxers. Asian women are 3 times as likely to use skin lighteners. And that was according to a recent study, again, from Inside Climate News. So this is, yeah, it's real. It's real. Products marketed towards Black and brown women or just Black and brown people of color, as mentioned, men are using them too, contain some of the most toxic chemicals used by the cosmetic industry. And many of these chemicals have never been assessed for safety on a federal level. So my next thought exercise, do you know what your chemical footprint is? Can you take a minute right now and just list out every single product that you use today that you put on your body? So think about your skincare routine, your healthcare and beauty products, your toothbrush, your toothpaste, your lotion, the perfume, makeup, eyelash glue, nail polish, household cleaning products. Do you use a disinfectant to wipe down your kitchen every night? Do you use dish soap? Probably. You probably use laundry detergent. Maybe you're using scent boosters now. And then environmental exposures. So just as you go on about your day, what's floating around in the air around you? What's in your drinking water? What's in your clothing or the furniture that you're sitting on? What's the dust in your house made of? Do you know which chemicals of high concern you're being exposed to? Many of us don't, because the information is really, really hard to access. So just think about what your chemical footprint might be and just how many individual chemical ingredients you're being exposed to every day. So I actually did this earlier, and this was just from like the first few hours of my day. I use toothpaste, hand soap, a prebiotic moisturizer, liquid collagen, dish soap, body lotion, face moisturizer. And that was just in like the first hour of my day. So I know that might have been a little bit scary to think about, because I did say there are chemicals of high concern in pretty much everything, and they're basically completely unregulated. But don't panic, because there are things you can do to reduce your personal toxic exposure through the products that you use every day. So the first thing I would recommend doing is doing whatever you can to identify the chemical ingredients of products that you use and purchase so that you can find safer alternatives. Clearia is an app that I use all the time, and I have links to everything I've referenced. I tell all my family and friends about this app because it's so easy to use. And like, I'm not getting paid by them. I'm not a sponsor. I just think it's a really useful tool if this is something you care about. So the app, as you're shopping on your phone or on your computer, it will scan the ingredient list of your product, and it will flag any chemical that has been deemed toxic by any chemical regulatory body across the globe. So the United States has very, very lax regulations, much less strict than Canada or Europe or Japan. A lot of the things you can buy here are completely illegal in other parts of the globe. Clearia will tell you if your product is banned in Canada. That's something I would like to know and avoid. It also will flag things like common allergens. So I think it's really helpful. I use it for like all the lotion and makeup that I buy. So I do know at least that my prebiotic moisture, my liquid collagen, and my body lotion don't have chemicals of high concern because I scan them in Clearia. Another really useful tool you can use is this new database by Breast Cancer Prevention Partners and Black Women for Wellness, which are both nonprofit organizations, called the Non-Toxic Black Beauty Project, where they've made a very extensive list of products that are not just free of toxic chemicals, but they're also sold and owned by Black people. So that's kind of a 2-for-1. You can buy clean products and also support Black owned businesses, which is really, really great. Well, that was pretty much my last slide. Finally, this is my list of resources. I put links to all the different reports and articles and organizations I mentioned. This is my email address if you want to get in touch with me and talk about this some more or ask any other questions offline. Feel free to do so. And yeah, I will pause for any additional comments or reflections. A few more things came into the chat, but I just wanted to get through my slides, so I'm going to go back to.
Very good.
And
wonderful.
while you're looking at the slides, Kayla, we're talking about skin lighteners and things. But I remember when I was growing up, the first time when I was in high school was when it was brought to my attention white beauty standards, and somebody in my high school who was Asian had an operation to change her eyes because they were slanted eyes, and she wanted more European looking eyes. And that was a big thing. I don't know if that still is happening as much as it was during, my teenage years, but that was a very big thing. If you had Asian eyes, you were having operations to change your eyes so that they would not be as slanted.
Yeah. I don't know if it's more or less common, but I know it's still something you can get, something you can pay for. I don't personally have a lot of experience with Asian beauty standards, or East Asian beauty standards.
Yeah.
But I do know that like throughout every society and culture of people of color, like white skin, more like I was saying in the beginning, features that are in closer proximity to whiteness are really upheld as like the ideal. And that's
Or Hermione, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, says that double eyelid surgery is sadly still very popular. So that's another thing. And also Birgette Mondesir has a comment. Is she can say she can't raise her hand?
She couldn't raise her hand.
Birgette?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So let me just mute the rest of my. Okay, so I just want to thank Kayla. It was an amazingly informative presentation. I'm so proud of you because she's one of my babies. But anyway, so I digress. um, I just had the first question you asked when you mentioned has your perceived color or gender ever afforded you any advantages, for lack of a better, I'm paraphrasing. And I just had a really funny story. For those, don't have my video on, but I'm a Black woman. I'm very much so Black, and there's no variation. There's no possibility of not recognizing me as a Black woman. So several years ago, we decided to refinance our home. And I remember sending in some forms and things of that nature. And there were a few other things that were needed for the refinance to take place. And I remember getting a call from the bank representative. And so it was a male, and he asked me a few questions. And then he asked me about my name. My name happens to be Jean Burgette Mondesir, and it's part French and part German. And my husband's name is Jean Mondesir, and that's all French. So, and that's going to come into play in a minute. So there were certain things that he needed to request from me in order to make this, to complete the transaction online, and actually by phone at the time, because we weren't so into technology as we are now. And so I offered to send him some information that he had requested, and he said to me, no, that won't be necessary. And I said, well, you had requested it before when you had mailed me, because at that time there was no email. And I was about to send this out. And he says, no, I think it'll be fine. We'll be able to process your refinance papers, and and I'll send you when a decision is made, and I'll let you know that the papers and everything has gone through. So that did happen. Probably about a few weeks later, maybe about a month later, we received our papers. And on our papers, it was approved for the finances. I didn't have to turn in, I believe they wanted like 6 weeks of pay stubs, or a month of whatever it was at the time. I can't remember the specifics, but I'm trying to make a long story short. And I thought, that's really strange that they didn't require me to do this. And then at the bottom of the paper, there was a racial identity on there, and it said Caucasian. And so what I then realized is the assumption may be made by my articulation, my name, and the origins of my name, that I was a white person. And as such, I didn't have to send in the required documentation that's necessary, that would normally have been necessary. So I can only take from that in a very reversal of fortune way, that actually worked to my advantage, because it was assumed, and not assumed because I know for sure it was, because that box was just automatically checked and I didn't check it. That was just checked when the papers came in. So the assumption was, I guess, I'm not a Black person. If I'm refinancing, I own a home. So that too doesn't fare well for me being a Black person. And then the names that were on the papers were German and French. And in speaking to me, he certainly couldn't ascertain whether I was Black or white. So the assumption was made that I was white. So he took it upon himself to check white, to Caucasian. And I believe that that's the reason why the papers went through without me having to supply any additional financial information. So it was one of those really strange, but to this day, with that particular company, I'm checked as Caucasian. So that's my story.
Yeah, that's a very blatant example. Patty.
Birgit, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
my husband to this day says, shouldn't we change it? And I said, no, why should we?
Hell no.
I didn't tell them I was. They just,
in fact, it would be great if you could walk in and meet that guy in person and say, hi, thanks for your help with the blah, blah. Anyway, But you reminded me, just shortly, I have a friend who was moved to the island of Jamaica many years ago. Very, very white guy. And apparently it's not that easy for people who are not native or who are not official residents of Jamaica. It's hard for them to get a job, but he's like, well, I got to get a job. So he fills out the application and he writes down place of birth, Jamaica. So they instantly, gave him an interview. But when he showed up, they were surprised because he was so white, but he wasn't born in the country of Jamaica. He was born in Jamaica, Queens, and they just assumed that he was a black guy showing up for the interview. Anyway, that's not what I wanted to say. A lot of folks here may have seen the documentary that Chris Rock made some years ago called Good Hair. And I'm just wondering, I learned a lot. I mean, I knew a little bit about the conversation. I learned a lot from that. I thought it was an excellent movie. And I was just wondering, Kayla, if you have any comments about that.
I did see that movie when it came out. I know it was a while ago, and I haven't seen it recently. But as a Black woman, that wasn't really news to me. I guess I definitely didn't have an understanding of like where the bundles come from. That was very jarring, I think. Like the scenes from, I think they were like in India. They're like convincing people through like a religious message that they need to shave their head, and then they take the hair and then it ends up in beauty supply shops. Like that was disturbing. So I didn't know about that. I did not know about the supply chain. That's like a whole other example of like chemical exposure through products, because just that hair is very processed. Even if it's 100% human hair, it's getting treated with a lot of chemicals along the way. And if it's synthetic, if it's plastic like Kanekalon, it's even less clear what it's made out of. So yeah, I think just thinking about hair and chemicals at the same time. When I was getting ready for this presentation, I saw a figure like that Black women as a consumer group spend upwards of like $5.7 trillion a year on hair and beauty products. Like we have the most buying power in that industry. Because it's so entrenched how important it is to be presentable, professional. When I was a little kid, I had genuine fear and anxiety about what I was going to do with my hair as a grown-up. Now I wear my hair naturally in an afro and I know how to take care of it the right way. But I didn't until I was a grown-up, not really until a few years ago. And I went to predominantly white schools. I had other Black people in my life, thankfully, from my church community. Like, thank you, Miss Bernice, for being here. But again, like that, the messaging, you just get so inundated. And then I also remember the first time I got made fun of for my natural hair was in kindergarten. Like you just learn from an early age that it's bad and you shouldn't have that and it should be different and people don't like it and you need to change it. And that's why we're willing to spend $6 trillion a year on it. And it's very hard to unlearn. It's very hard to unlearn, but it is possible. And like I'm now on my own natural hair journey. chopped it all off and grew it back and cut it off again, and I'm still learning the best way to take care of it. Because it's also like not any easier manageable to have natural hair as a Black woman also. It requires a lot of time and attention and energy. It's easier to have a wig or braids or a relaxer. Some people will choose the formaldehyde anyway, just because it's easier for them to manage, or they believe it is easier for them to manage.
Mm-hmm. Either way, it's a challenge.
And we have
we've got quite a few people
messages. Yeah, I wanted to also to mention Helen had said to everyone she's always checking ewg.org.
Yeah, products. Environmental Working Group. That's an eco label. They have a lot of cool products. There are a lot of tools available. Those two I mentioned, they're just near and dear to me because I know the people behind them. They're in my network, but definitely research more clean lists, ingredient scanners, eco labels.
Yeah.
Yvonne Grayson has her hand up raised. She wasn't able to.
There's a few people with their hands up.
Right.
So I saw Maya's hand first, and then Helen's, and then if Yvonne's hand is up, maybe she can go third. Yeah. But Maya, do you want to go first?
Yeah, well, first, Kayla, congratulations. You did a great job. I just want to clarify that I am the sister who had the experience. I'm Kayla's youngest sister, and that was a very difficult conversation for us to have, given that we all, Kayla, Julie, and myself, we have the same family. We grew up in the same environment. Kayla and I went to the same high school and college, but in that very moment, it was a very distinctive experience that demonstrated that despite we have all these similarities, if you know us, I'm sure we have so many family friends in the Zoom right now, and family. My Aunt Helen is raising her hand, but if you know us and you grew up with us, you know that we're sisters and we're a unit. But to be so outwardly perceived by a stranger and to have such a distinct outlook on, how different I am from literally the people who I share a gene pool with is very crazy, and just an experience. I have two experiences that I would want to note that happened when I was really little, and I was with Kayla in an open setting, and somebody from my middle school saw us together and they asked if I was adopted. Because my oldest sisters are lighter skinned and I don't necessarily look like them, but that was very disturbing to have that level of race consciousness at such a young age. And that's also not an experience that happens, for white people. And just also expanding on Kayla's point about, learning how to manage your hair as a Black woman. It's an experience that is just, I feel like every Black woman goes under that experience completely. And, just having conversations with my mom, like my mom who has a white mom, she would have her hair chopped off when she was little. But that's just because, not out of spite for her Black hair, but just because there's a level of disconnect between her white mother knowing how to do her Black hair. And so as I've grown up with a mom who has taken the time to learn how to braid hair and take care of our hair, and then also growing up in an environment where my mother wears her hair naturally, and thus influencing both my sisters and myself to also wear our hair naturally and proudly, I would just like to say that that is not necessarily the experience for all Black women and Black people, period. And I'm very blessed to have had that experience, to understand that being natural is okay. I don't even think I can tell you the last time I straightened my hair. It might have been kindergarten for like a day. But again, that is a very unique and nuanced experience that I myself went through. So yeah.
Thank you, Maya. Very nice.
Thanks for coming. Helen? Hi.
Hi. Congratulations, Kayla. You've done a wonderful job. I'm really, really proud of you. You know, it's been an interesting journey. Like for me, when my son Logan was born, I started looking at everything from diapers to wipes to baby food to personal products. I mean, there's so much in everything right now that we are inundated with. And I remember just having the experience of having, you know, my mother-in-law say, well, we didn't have all those chemicals and all this stuff when we were growing up. So she had sort of this disbelief that there wasn't all of these things in all of the products because there wasn't back then, you know. And so that journey has really taken me, you know, on looking at it. And I saw the Chris Rock, you know, show, the movie that he did. And there was also another show that was on Netflix, and I can't remember the name of it, but it went through like the relaxants, hair, formaldehyde, like all of the different nail polishes and the nail salons and all the women that are experiencing all of these issues from just being the people that do your nails and that are exposed to the chemicals of doing your hair. And they're breathing it in while they're doing it, you know. And so, you know, it's been this journey that has taken me through just this, like, oh my gosh, how do I get clean on everything? And so yeah, the ewg.org was a big one, but like sharing it with people and the fact that you're doing that right now, and you know, it touches on like everybody, you know, and how it affects everyone as a whole. You know, I was thinking about, you know, what you were saying about the one of the first slides you had. And for me, like, as a white woman, like I always just thought I had privilege as a white woman who was cute. And it wasn't even really about being white. It was more just about, oh, I'm cute and I'm a girl, so I can get what I want, you know. And then later, you know, with everything that's happened since COVID, and you know, you and I, Kayla, have had a conversation about it, and just all of the things that have happened and have gradually evolved in the last, I want to say, I know it's been an ongoing thing, but I think it's been more since, like, you know, George Floyd and all of the stuff that happened around that has really presented itself to have more conversations and deeper levels of conversations about race and how people and different people are affected. And it opened my eyes to a lot of things that, even as somebody that I never thought was, you know, racist or anything like that my heart was never like that. There were things that I felt like I noticed that I was doing that didn't feel racist, but that were affecting people in different ways. And so I'm really, really grateful. And it's not always an easy conversation to have, but I'm really, really grateful that I have people in my life that I can have that conversation with, because I want to learn more and I want to do more and I want to be better. And so I'm just really, really grateful that you're doing this and that you're putting this information out there. So I'm really, really proud of you, hon.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Yeah, we're at 8:30 now, Kayla, which is when we usually stop. There are a couple more comments that maybe we could take, just if everybody's willing to stick with us for maybe 5 more minutes. And let me just say, I am very much into doing things environmentally. In fact, I use cloth diapers with my first 2 children. Vinegar, baking soda, things like this work great for cleaning. I mean, what our grandmothers used was not all the chemicals and things that we currently use, even though we talk about a clean environment. Today, a lot of just basic things that we have in our house that you don't have to go out and spend a lot of money on. They work just as well, if not better. But
yeah.
Okay. Do we want to go back to, I think Yvonne Grayson had a question, and then Barbara Withers had a comment.
Right.
Yvonne, are you still with us?
I am. I really just wanted to say congratulations, Kayla. This was amazing. but also to respond to the comment about the movies that have been, I mean, in part, I think what they tried to do was kind of give a history of this whole paradigm as an industry, right? And how much money that industry generates. And the thing that I took away in part from some of the movies that have been presented is how, and it kind of ties into reparations, the concept that with all the money African American women spend on hair care, there are very few, if any, African American women who are reaping the benefits from those products or from this huge industry. And in many instances, what was documented were the very overt tactics that are used to keep not only African Americans, but many, if and any other races out of the billions of dollars that African American women spend on hair. So, I mean, tying that back to reparations, I think there are things where we as a community can look at what we spend our money on and what, as Kayla's trying to espouse, what we put on our bodies, but also to look at where our dollars are directed and how to kind of rechannel those dollars so that the communities who are spending that money have an opportunity to benefit from those dollars. Because right now we don't. Everywhere we go to purchase products for our hair, those stores are owned by people that don't look anything like us. And in most cases, they don't even understand our hair. You can't, most of the stores you go into, you can't even ask people for advice, the kind of advice that Kayla's giving. All they know is what they order from the suppliers. They rarely, if ever, understand exactly how our hair works. If you're natural, if you're processed, whatever it is, if you're natural trying to keep your hair straight, you can't get that advice. So back to reparations, I think it can take many, many forms. And one of it would be looking at where African Americans spend their money and what are the barriers to us trying to enter those economies and be a leading part of it. We understand our race, we understand our skin, we understand, as Kayla's doing, what affects our skin. So why are we not able economically to be a part of those economies? And right now it just doesn't happen. And I think that was one of the things that those movies pointed out to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, and then Royal Lynn did make a comment that speaks to what Yvonne touched on, saying, I believe our hair is another aspect about Black women that makes us unique.
Definitely. And for that reason, I believe it's something every Black woman can embrace. If they are intentional about it. Royland.
Barbara Withers also said there's a current bestseller, Rouge by Mona Awad, about a character obsessed with skin and skincare
videos.
We can take just one or two more, Kayla, and then we have to end.
Okay.
Royal Lynn, I believe, had her hand up again.
Yes, I was going to say, okay, ladies, so are we going to collaborate and let's put together some products and get it on the market?
Yeah.
I don't like to just spill the problem. Let's get some solutions and get active.
We can't hear you.
I was able to hear. Royland was just saying we should talk about solutions, not just the problem, and be active in building those. So again, I'm going to encourage you all to look into the Non-Toxic Black Beauty Project, because it is a database of Black-owned businesses that you can give money to, rather than other corporations or business owners that are maybe not part of the community or don't understand the community. I don't remember what it was called, but I recently saw a TikTok video about a Black woman that just started her own brand of organic, non-toxic synthetic hair that I think is made out of like banana fiber or something. So there are a lot of really cool, new, innovative technologies when it comes to safer alternatives. They are out there already. And if you are a smart shopper and you seek them out, they're yours for the taking, and you can support a Black-owned business. And you can also reduce your personal chemical exposure and your chemical footprint at the same time.
Well, Kayla, it's been just a great program. We had tons and tons of comments in the chat. People that have not shared before that were with us tonight shared. Everybody really enjoyed this program. We'll have to have a part 2 coming up, because this is a subject that we could go on and on about. I mean, the money spent in the beauty industry is just astronomical. And I think, as you pointed out tonight, particularly money spent in the Black community, obviously, is a tremendous amount. And we have different beauty standards all across the world, but in many countries, they're still lightening their skin. In Africa, the entire continent of Africa, skin lightening is a very big thing. So we thank you for bringing a lot of these things to our attention. As I said, we won't have a program in December, but this was a great ending to our 2023 programming. And we all thank you so much. And thanks to our audience, because as I said, we'd never have this program without you. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Kayla. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone. See you next year.
Hey.
Have a great year. Thank you.
Bye.
Great job, Kayla. Proud of you. And I know Sarah's proud as well.
Yeah.
Good. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Good job, gal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And thanks
Everybody.
to all of Kayla's friends for being with us tonight.
Yes, this was wonderful.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
Great.
One of our
Great
best.
program. Definitely.
Good job.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.